Hi, everyone. Welcome to another one of our DSO webinar series. So excited to be with you here today. My name is Jenny Fetty. I'm with HR for Health. I have the privilege of speaking with Bob Winder. He is the CEO and founder of Logan Growth Advisors. And of course, we have Ali Aramchian with us, CEO and co-founder of HR for Health. So today we're going to be talking about a huge topic, mergers and acquisitions in the dental industry, and then all subjects around that. So I'd love to pass it to Ali to get us started. And then at the end, if there are any questions from our audience, of course, we would love to get those answered for everyone. So Ali, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Awesome. Thanks, Jenny. Thank you. Bob, welcome. I'm so happy you're here. And I hear there's a rumor out there that M&A deals in Hawaii just always go smoothly. Is there truth to that?
Well, unfortunately, I'd not be the one to know that because I've never had a smooth deal, especially not here in Hawaii.
Yeah, well, we had, as you know, we've had some crazy weather here in California this past winter, and it was like sunny for like 10 days, so I got to feel a little bit of what you see, I think, every day. But then it got like, it's like 30 degrees today and cold again. So here we are. But no, thanks for joining me. We are seeing some really interesting trends out there, and I wanted you to be, kind of participate in this webinar so you can kind of educate our audience on some of the things that you're seeing. But before we get into all that, you want to tell our audience a little bit about yourself and sort of what you do and anything that's important about you.
Sure. Well, it's great to be here, Ali. This is fun because I know we've done this a bunch of times, just me and you talking about market terms and trends and things like that. So it's fun to have this, be a live session together. So Bob Winder, founder of Logan Growth, as was mentioned. So I worked in private equity for years, and then I saw a bunch of dentists doing amazing things, and we tried to make investments in their companies and felt like, geez, I should try to be on the receiving end of one of those checks. $50, $100 million checks that we were writing on the private equity side during the last recession 12 years ago. And so I raised some capital, found a dentist partner, bought some practices, and pretty quickly learned, hey, this is not nearly as easy as those guys made it look. I felt kind of a bait and switch. This is really hard. Dealing with staff issues, doctor recruiting, trying to get more patients in the door, just so many issues. So hard to get a practice really humming along and performing well. So that was a great education for me. Ended up selling that group to a bigger strategic, did okay financially, but more than anything, just learned a lot. And then kept getting inquiries from business owners about how to work with private equity, how to raise capital. And so, the first deal we did was introduced to us by a private equity group that was looking to buy it for 20 million, and they walked away because it was hairy and raw, introduced me. We helped them get things cleaned up and pitched it to private equity and ended up selling it for 40 less than a year later. So that's when I realized, okay, I need to be doing this, not running dental practices. Let's leave that to the pros. I need to be helping them work with private equity and preparing for a transaction.
No, I love that. I love that. And I've heard you tell me that story before too. And I love that because I think what we're seeing right now in the industry is a lot of people in that same kind of mode or feeling the same way you felt before you sold your practice. Because what I've seen is, since COVID at least, there's been a lot more interest from our emerging groups. And for those of you who are listening today, when we talk about emerging groups, we're talking about anybody who has 3 to 5 offices sort of on the low end trying to grow, right? Trying to grow. We have folks who come to our DSO Leadership Summit that have 50 offices and they still consider themselves emerging, but really what we're talking about is folks who are in that 3 to 5 range and looking to grow to 10, or more. And what we're seeing is that I think people are getting to a point, Bob, where they're realizing, running 3, 4, 5 is not the same as running 1 and 2, right? And they still want to sell to a larger group, either a strategic or someone else who's maybe trying to do it on their own, that maybe is further down the line, but they don't know how to get there with the right systems and the right procedures and all those things. And so I really want to kind of talk to you about that and talk about, okay, how does someone go from 3 to 5, 6, and how do they, what are the first steps they need to take to really prepare themselves to grow to those, to the bigger sizes, to be able to get the multiples that they're hoping for, right? And so I'd love to dig into that with you, but also before we do that, can you just give like a 30,000 foot level kind of overview of what you're seeing in the market right now? Like, what are the deal sizes? What are the average EBITDAs that you're seeing? Multiples, maybe. I know a lot of things, can vary depending on different, metrics, but give us sort of just a lay of the land. Have things slowed down, or are things pretty strong still?
It's been so interesting to see this roller coaster come in before COVID, during COVID, now post COVID. It's completely a roller coaster in dental M&A. At the start of COVID, the sky is falling, everything shut down, and then as everything opened up again, the M&A markets just went crazy, and we saw in 2021 just irrational exuberance in every asset class. And so it was wonderful to be a seller in 2021, selling anything, right? Selling real estate, selling dental practice, selling your DSO, whatever, amazing multiples, just an incredible time. And of course, that kind of irrational exuberance can't last forever. So then in 2022, things kind of come back to reality, things come crashing down. Of course, interest rates go up a lot. And people are really worried and talk a lot about the cost of capital, which certainly has had an influence. But the biggest impact I've seen in terms of the velocity of deals or the volume of deals happening or multiples, et cetera, has been the ratcheting back of debt terms. So as most of you probably know, these big DSOs, they do most of their acquisitions primarily with debt. They don't put in a whole lot more equity. And so they've got these amazing lender terms that they can, have super high leverage ratios to go acquire additional practices. And when their lenders started ratcheting back those terms because of all the trepidation in the market, that really turned off the spigot for a lot of these bigger DSOs doing acquisitions, and even for the private equity groups. So that's what brought down multiples. But people compare it to 2021, which was the high water mark. But if you compare the multiples today to pre-pandemic, the multiples are still great. So, it's just tough to compare to the high water mark of 2021. But, I feel like that was more of a flash in the pan. Of course, it's still, there's still great opportunities if you have a great business. So we've got quite a few deals in market, and we're seeing, really nice multiples still, but certainly not what we saw in 2021. I'd say the other thing on the seller's perspective, or on the founder's perspective, is there's been a lot of folks that are coming off just not a good year. 2022 was rough with wage inflation, et cetera. A lot of folks just didn't have a high EBITDA year. They didn't show growth. And so a lot of folks are saying, well, geez, I need to hunker down and really right the ship before I think about an M&A event. So we have seen volume decrease quite a bit, both from the buyer perspective and the seller perspective. It's been interesting.
Bob, and I'm glad you brought that up, because when we talk to a lot of our doctors on the on the law side, about finding the right partner to potentially sell to, it's not just about the buyers interviewing the sellers, right? It's also the sellers interviewing the buyers and making sure that it's the right buyer. Because like you said, coming out of 21 to 20, in 22, there's been a lot of, rocky roads for some, groups that weren't necessarily on stronger foundations. So, let's go down that road a little bit. If you are advising a seller, because I know that's what you do, and they're starting to go down this road, what's a couple of pieces of advice that you would give right off the bat as they're just starting the process?
That's a great question. I love this conversation. It's really, what are they looking to accomplish? So how big are you? What are your end goals? What are you looking to accomplish? So if you're above 3 million of EBITDA, if you're call it 4 million of EBITDA, call it 10, 12, 15 practices, you're big enough to talk directly with private equity and be considered your own platform. If you're 1.5 million of EBITDA, you're probably not. So your likely buyer universe is going to be other DSOs, which is fine. Both of those outcomes can be fantastic and they're different, but both are attractive. So, that kind of, even if you're bigger, you can certainly partner with the DSO, but you also have the private equity direct opportunity. Whereas if you're smaller, like I said, it's mostly just going to be other DSOs. And there's every type of DSO flavor under the sun now. It's amazing to see so many different types of DSOs and doctor partnerships and joint ventures and different ways to share economics. It's become much more favorable to doctors than it was 10 years ago, frankly. 10, 12 years ago, it was this associate model, and everyone was capitalizing on, hey, there's all these baby boomer retirees. Let's figure out how to consolidate, those and help them, retire off into the sunset and replace them with associates. And so it was this very associate heavy, really clean, clear, easy cap table. But today, that's not the model that's winning. Today, the model that's winning is this shared economics, lots and lots of equity holders, whether it's at the platform level or at the joint venture practice level, and skin in the game, trying to recruit and the A docs that have a small group of practices, and then they can go grow as a joint venture. We're seeing that really proliferate. And I frankly like that model. I think it makes a ton of sense, but the devil's in the details. So it's really easy to kind of get, go on a couple dates or go to a lunch or two with these folks, and they'll, tell you wonderful things and you get pretty enamored. But let's look at the details of the specific model. How does your equity get treated in a rollover? What kind of clawbacks or guarantees do you have to give? What's their management fee? I have a group that, one of my clients almost transacted with. Everything on paper looked great, and then we saw, wait, they're layering on what kind of management fee on top of your EBITDA? What kind of distributions are you going to get in the future with that? I mean, there's issues with every deal. And so, really understanding what you're trying to accomplish. Is it, hey, I want to maximize economics today? Or is it, no, I really want to grow, and I got 5 locations, which means a bank is allergic to me. They don't know what to do with me. So I need to find another source of capital. And so maybe partnering with another DSO to relieve myself from personal guarantees and have access to more capital, and I can still be an entrepreneur and grow and have additional upside. So for a lot of folks, it's, yeah, I just want additional upside. I don't want to take chips off the table today. I want additional upside. Or for other folks, it's, I'm so sick of HR. I want other folks to do the administrative burden for me, and I can just focus on what I'm good at. Let me find a group that can really have, a heavy hand in the operations, and then I can, relieve myself from some of those responsibilities and do what I like to do. So it's really those 3 buckets that I see most doctors come to me trying with the issues trying to solve. It's either diversifying their illiquid net worth, relieving themselves from some of that administrative burden, or having additional upside that they can't achieve on their own.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And that's exactly right. Yeah, I see those 3 buckets too. And I think, obviously the chips taking off the table or with, the additional upside, those are business decisions that people are making based on how strong their practices are. The good news is that with the second thing you mentioned, which is, being frustrated with the administrative side, if, that's where HR for Health comes in, because so much of that HR headache is really based on not having a strong foundation for the HR and for recruitment. A lot of our doctors that use HR for Health, don't have as many issues with lost employees and turnovers and whatnot, because they have a strong HR foundation, and they can recruit even stronger candidates, naturally, through their current employees, which a lot of people, I think, forget that the best referral for an employee is another employee who's happy with their job, right? And it's kind of like in your business and in our business, a happy customer is the best referral, because they're going to refer their friends and have experience. And so the same thing is true with the team, and doctors sometimes forget that. And I think that's where, HR, for Health at least can help with some of that. But, you said something that is so foundationally important that I want to kind of go back to it. You're talking about EBITDA, right? And what that means. And for a lot of doctors, they think about EBITDA the way their CPA thinks about EBITDA, right? The way their tax returns are prepared for the IRS, right? And I always say that, the way your tax returns and your financials are prepared for the IRS is very different than the way it needs to be prepared and presented when you're looking to maximize value and sell, right?
Because the opposite. It's the opposite.
Exactly. It's the opposite. And I have a funny story to tell you. I was doing a seminar about a week ago at the American Association of Orthodontics, and I said that same exact line to, with one of my slides, and this hand goes up right at the very end when I was getting ready for questions, and this gentleman says, you know what, I sold to a group a few years ago, and I wish I had known what you just said about the financials, because I think I got taken advantage of and all this stuff, and I appreciated him opening up in front of this group of, a couple hundred people, because the reality is that, when you're presenting stuff to the IRS or your CPA is doing it, that's for tax minimization purposes, right? By the way, I didn't say tax avoidance, that would send you to jail. Tax minimization, tax minimization. but
That's why you need an attorney in your life. Right nomenclature.
That's right. But when you're presenting to a DSO, you want for value, you want to present it in a way that increases your value. So Bob, can you talk a little bit about that? Like I would, what would you want someone to not do, or maybe do, before they come talk to you? If they're looking to talk to a DSO, like, should they share their financials, or should they talk to you first?
No, don't share your. So first impressions are so incredibly important. And as Ali said, typically your financials are in such a state that they're prepared for taxes, which is fine. You're trying to minimize your net income as much as possible. That's what everybody does, and that makes all the sense in the world. But sharing that same minimized net income or earnings with a potential acquirer to anchor them on that low number, how is that a good idea? That's a horrible idea. Do not do that, right? So what we do is we do a quality of earnings, and that's what the buyer does too. So we have a group from KPMG that has done hundreds, if not thousands, of these studies to establish EBITDA for buyers. And now on the sell side, it's the same playbook, but we know exactly what the buyer will accept and what they won't. And so this is adding back one-time expenses, adding back seller discretionary expenses. We've seen all sorts of crazy stuff. We have to remind them, we're not the IRS. Just be fully transparent with us.
Right.
If your yacht captain or your NASCAR team is here, let's add it back. That's obviously, not a real business expense, and that's okay. So adding back all those. Also pro forma new initiatives. So if you have a new location that's only 8 months old, let's run rate what it's doing today, or what we believe it's going to do at close in the next 6 months, etc. Let's look at, hey, we hired 2 more doctors, 2 more orthodontists, etc. Let's look at their ramp rate. Let's not look at what they were doing, 6 or 8 months ago. Let's look at what the business is doing today. And let's get credit for that, because that's what the business is and that's what the business should be valued on. And so there's a lot of subjectivity, unfortunately, to the EBITDA calculation. It's not a generally accepted accounting principle. It's not a gap, fundamental term. So because of that, there's a lot of wiggle room and there's a lot of subjectivity. And so I'd say half the battle in getting a good deal done is establishing a really aggressive but defensible EBITDA. And that is often dramatically overlooked and even just given to the buyer to figure out, which what incentive does the buyer have, right? It's unbelievable. So they hire folks to do a quality of earnings, and rarely will they even share that with you. So
Yeah.
they'll say, if you say, oh, well, I did a couple ad backs on my own, and I believe my EBITDA is, 2.6 million, they'll come and they'll do their quality of earnings. They might internally say it's actually more like 3.5, and they won't tell you. And they'll say, you know what, it all checks out. We'll go with your 2.6. Whereas, you just left $1 million of EBITDA on the table, times that with an 8 or 10 times multiple. It's unbelievable. So we see that all the time.
Yeah. I actually was just speaking to a doctor a couple of days ago, and he asked me this question. And he's a super sophisticated guy. He's got 5 offices. He said he's got about $3 million of EBITDA. He's a specialist, and I haven't seen any of his financials, but he asked me a really interesting question. He said, do you think it's valuable for me to hire a professional to help me to sell my business, or do you think I can get whatever I can get on my own? And I'm glad he asked that question, because Bob, a lot of people won't even ask that question, right? They'll just kind of move forward on their own saying, what can someone help me with? But the reality is like you said, every dollar of expense that's moved from one category to another could potentially mean anywhere from $7 to $8 in return for a buyer, or for a seller, I should say. And sometimes they don't know that, right? They don't know that because they're so used to the valuation calculations that their local dental brokers doing for them. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
that's a totally different analysis. And And so yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head. If there's one thing anyone who's listening today gets from this is never ever share your financials with a buyer until it's been professionally vetted, by someone on your team that's not your current CPA, right? Because they
Right.
most likely will not know how to do it, and so it's gotta, call us, call Bob, and we'll connect you with the right people to do that, because that's how you get your maximum valuation, and that's a huge part of it. That's a huge part of it. So okay, great. So Bob, let's talk about something that I think scares a lot of sellers, right? Which is that they get into negotiations, right? Hopefully using you, or someone like you to help with the negotiations, and then the buyer comes in and suddenly reduces the valuation, right? Suddenly, pulls the rug out from under them. Do you see that happening often? If it does happen and valuations are reduced, what are the things that you're seeing that reduces it?
Yeah, I see that all the time, unfortunately, or I see it attempted fairly frequently. And it's a delicate game that the buyers play, and oftentimes it's justified, and oftentimes it's not justified. And so usually the justification is if some significant or material negative event has happened to the business that they learn about and say, hey, this impacts valuation. The biggest uh, time, or the most frequent time period we see when there is an impact evaluation, is after the buyer's quality of earnings is done.
Mm,
So unfortunately, sometimes you'll see a seller, put forth an EBITDA that's too aggressive, that's not really defensible, that's too forward looking, or just not really defensible. Or they'll come up with add backs that aren't real. Say, hey, sure, my lab and supplies are 15%, but yours are 5%, so you should just give me your
mhm.
5%. But hey, I'm an implant specialist, so of course I'm going to
Right,
have higher, you know. So stuff like that we see often, especially when we're on, have helped buyers, and we see some brokers put forth add backs that are just completely not defensible, and it just unfortunately wastes everybody's time. That hey, actually, this isn't a real add back. Like, you still need to work, you still need, a salary. You can't add back all of your salary if you're the main producing doctor. And so the quality of earnings from the buyer's perspective, when that comes out, often that's the biggest kind of hinge point of when there's often a retrade or a reduction or a change to valuation. And sometimes it's justified and sometimes it's not. We had a deal that, the buyer came back with their quality of earnings $2 million less than what we had, well, actually they did, the seller put forth their number, the buyer came and did their quality of earnings $2 million less. And then they brought us in to try to do LOI defense. And we came in and we actually found, hey, well, the buyer said, well, you have all this additional labor cost. I'm like, yeah, because we hired 3 additional doctors, so we
right,
should get credit. So they were run rating the expense, but not run rating or annualizing the additional revenue. And
right.
so of course they're going to have a huge hit. There were a few items like that were extremely penal, that were just kind of ridiculous, that we were able to find and eliminate. So that helped things out a lot. But so that's the biggest point. The other I'd say is with terms. So a lot of times folks get so fixated on this multiple or a dollar amount, and that's
Mhm.
kind of the only thing that matters to them. But the devil's in the details, as you know more than anybody. You can shift
Right,
economics tremendously just based on the terms of the deal. And so from a buyer's perspective, or from the seller's perspective, it might say 10 times multiple, but from the buyer's perspective, based on all the structure and all the details of the terms, they might be thinking, hey, this is more like an 8 times deal because we have all these, bells and whistles and poison pills that are planted in the terms and in the details that, we know this isn't really a 10 times deal. So there's a lot of tricks and there's a lot of kind of games that the buyers can play. And, unfortunately, we see it all the time. But because they know the seller wants to see a big number, but they can't really defend that big number with their investment committee. So they add what they call structure in order to get to that big number.
yeah. Do I've seen a bunch of deals where HR has been a problem for the buyers, where they've seen that, the seller is hiring independent contractors instead of employees. They don't have like new hire forms for the current staff. They don't have employment manuals, things of that nature. Are you seeing that also sort of retrade? Do buyers retrade based on those kind of things as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, so you have to think that there's this pendulum, and it's, there's a lot of weight given to the incentive for wealth creation, and that's for the investor or the buyer too. But there's a whole lot of incentive for wealth preservation. And so it's this risk continuum of, we want to take risk, we want to have upside, but geez, we want to limit our downside.
Mhm.
And so a lot of folks that are pretty entrepreneurial don't really think about all the risks and the downside because they've been in this growth, wealth creation mode. Whereas when you're dealing with big time investors, and at the end of the day, private equity, they're the ones that pull all the strings. I mean, they have the puppet strings of the DSOs. They're at the end of the day, they're the buyers. And so I kind of just categorize all of the thinking in terms of, private equity.
Yeah.
So, you got to think these guys, they they represent big money, wealthy individuals, pensions, endowments, very conservative pools of money, and
Mhm.
they don't want to lose it. They don't want to have headline risks. They don't want to have issues. So to the extent there's any kind of these big headline risks or lawsuits or employee issues or class action issue, any of that stuff can absolutely either kill a deal or dramatically reduce value. So as you're preparing to go to market, buttoning those things up, reducing the skeletons in the closet, and HR is a huge one. At the end of the day, dental, we don't really have assets, it's people, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so it's all about how do you properly take care of your people to ensure that the engine's going to continue to run post close. And absolutely a big part of that is HR and documenting things appropriately.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's you're so right. I mean, it's all about the people, right? I mean, the human capital aspect of dental practices is really what drives everything. None of us could do what we do without our teams, and then that's especially true in a dental practice. And that's one of the things I think for those of you who are listening today, if you feel and you know who you are because this is something that we all have, right? It's that stress that sits on our shoulders, that weight of like, oh man, I know I'm not doing my HR correctly or my OSHA HIPAA correctly or whatnot. We all have it in our businesses in different ways, and so if you're there and you've got that stress, just it's really important, before you really start down this process, get your HR house in order, right? Contact Jenny at HR for Health and just do an audit. It's complimentary. We can tell you all the things that are good, bad, and ugly, and what you need to change. And there's a reason why a lot of private equity groups and companies like Bob's use our due diligence tool that we've created, because it allows them to spot issues with potential practices that are looking to acquire. And so it would be great if you went down this process before they did and you buttoned up all of those issues beforehand. And I've seen deals where it's dropped as much as like a point and a half, a point and a quarter, on deals, just because the doctor didn't have their HR, their HIPAA, their OSHA, didn't have their basic compliance stuff figured out, right? And I mean, this is just stress, right, for a potential buyer, because like you said, it increases the risk. It increases the risk. So okay. So Bob, let's pivot a little bit. So I'm a doctor, right? I've got 3, 5, 7 offices. I'm in my 50s, which is really crazy to even say that, because pre-COVID, I used to see people closer to 60 or early 60s sell their practices to private equity and groups. Now I'm seeing them in like their early 50s to mid 50s, like
Right.
selling, right? Which is pretty cool. But so I'm let's say my mid 50s. I've got a whole bunch of practices. I'm trying to decide whether to grow on my own or to try to create generational wealth by selling to a larger group. Okay. But I don't know what to do next. So what should they do next? Like, what is that first step? Is it a call to you? Is it, I mean, what should they do once they've made that decision?
Well, the good thing is you have options, right? So let's say you have 7 locations, couple million of EBITDA, that's a great business. I mean, congratulations. That very difficult to have kind of broken through their like that glass ceiling. There's always this pivot or persevere moment when you get to a handful of locations where it gets really hard, right? You can't be chairside at every location. You can't manage everything. So you have to kind of build a team around you and build systems and processes. Otherwise, you're gonna sink. And so to the extent you've done a lot of that and you've created a lifestyle that's a little more sustainable, congratulations, because a lot of people just don't get there. And so that's fantastic. And you have a lot of options. So sure, you could partner with a DSO. You could take some chips off the table, and depending on the DSO you partner with, you could roll equity and potentially have additional upside or relieve some of that administrative burden. And those are great options, right? Or you could continue going it on your own and figure out a more flexible debt provider in order to continue to do acquisitions or de novos, continue to partner with great guys like Ali and HR for Health or other, really good consultants that can provide some of those DSO-like services, but you still own all the equity. That's the beauty of today. I mean, the world is your oyster. There's just so many options. There's so much optionality for you, which is often, paralysis by analysis, right?
Right.
It's often even more stressful because you have so many options. But really thinking through, what do you want? Is it the right time? Do you feel like you'll sleep better at night if your bank account looks more like a phone number, based on one of these transactions? A lot of people I know really they feel like, hey, I sleep a lot better at night knowing that I have, a really good chunk of my net worth that's now liquid and in a place that I can direct easily. And if all goes wrong with my dental group, it's okay. And
Right.
so a lot of people kind of have that mindset of, hey, yeah, it does make sense to diversify my illiquid net worth, but I still want to run this. I still want to have skin in the game. I still want to have meaningful upside. I still want to be, a meaningful contributor and even in charge here. Is there a way to do that? And absolutely there is. But there are some folks that say, you know what? There's too much upside. I don't want to, give anyone else any of this upside. I just want to continue to grow on my own for as long as I can. And the beauty is that runway to be able to grow on your own is extended now more than it ever has been, based on just the third parties and the partners and the debt providers and folks that we can bring in around you in order to do that. And so it's really based on you and your individual needs and your goals. I wouldn't push a transaction on anybody unless it made sense for them, because it's a one-time thing. You can't ever, call it back, right? there,
Right.
there's there's no control Z. You're not undoing this ever. And so, you have to be pretty committed and it has to make sense for you. And the good thing is, if you have a good business, you're always going to have great options.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I love your perspective on that. And I think for anyone who's listening, if you are in that mindset and you want to make sure it's done right, give either reach out to me or Jenny or Bob directly, and we'll get you guys connected so that you can at least go through that thought process and take a real close look at your practice to see kind of what options do you have, as Bob said. And there's a lot of different ones, and it's important to kind of look at all of them with sort of a clear lens and, and decide, okay, which one of these paths is the right path. And Bob, I have to tell you, with all the clients of ours that you've worked with and whatnot, and I know people come up to you, and they came up to you at the DSO conference last year, you spoke at, at our summit, hearing your perspective on it, where you're not really pushing any one thing on these doctors, but rather, you're giving them options and letting them sort of pick the one that's right for them, is great. And that's why, we love having you on and on stage, because we know that's the messaging that they should be hearing, right? It's not a one package fits all, but there's a lot of, packages. Let's pick the right one for you, So thanks for being here. I know Jenny, I think, has some questions that we've been getting from the audience. So Jenny, you want to pepper those to Bob?
I do. And can I just say, holy moly, like this conversation was awesome. I'm going to watch this on repeat, as I'm sure many of our audience members will do as well, because there's so much great information. So thank you guys both for that awesome conversation. I have some really good questions here from my audience that I really want to ask you, Bob. I'm excited to see what your advice is on this. So what are some red flags when choosing an advisor? That was a good one.
Choosing an
So,
advisor.
yeah,
That's a great question. So it's interesting because I consider my competition just not using an advisor at all.
right.
Most of, I feel like my competition is a business owner, a dentist, just choosing to represent him or herself, selling to a DSO. And so I'm most of the time trying to convince dentists like, hey, you need to use an advisor. Don't do this on your own. You're crazy to think that, it's like me saying I'm going to do my own root canal. Like I'm not the expert on that. I'm going to hire your expertise to do that. It's the same for you. This is the most important financial event of your life. So I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking through, hey, what's the best, what are some downfalls of an advisor? But if you put me on the spot, I'm sure I could come up with some. So I feel like there is an inverted U in terms of, benefit and experience level. So if someone doesn't have any experience, that's probably a red flag. An experience, representing a dentist doing a, prime time M&A transaction with a bigger DSO or a private equity group. You just have to have done this a number of times in order to have the competency to be able to represent you appropriately. So really understand their experience, understand the outcomes, talk to their former clients, see how it went, etc., is really important. But I'd also say something maybe even a little controversial, that I'd say too much experience is also bad. If someone's saying, I've done this 1,000 times, I can do this with my eyes closed, and I'm just going to farm this to my junior team, and you're never going to talk to me again. I also think that's probably a red flag. You want to find an advisor that your deal is really important to them, that they're not just doing this with their eyes closed, right? That they're going to treat this like a very unique, important, once in a lifetime opportunity, like it really is. This is the most important financial event of your life. You want someone that's really going to take that and run with it as something extremely important to them, and that's not only important to them but important to their team. So is this a deal that is really, really small for them? Maybe you tried to get a big name, I'm gonna have Goldman Sachs, sell my business. It's like, does that make sense? Are you gonna get their A team, or you're gonna get their B or their C team that's working on 7 other deals, and you're kind of something that's not important to them at all? So I'd say, experience is really important, but also finding someone that, this is really important to them. Not only can they do it, but they really want to do it.
Yeah,
I love
that's awesome.
that. I love
Right.
that. I love that. That is so important. That is so important. I love that you said that, Bob. I mean, if anyone's listening, that is probably the most important thing we've talked about today is making sure you find the right person who cares about your business as much as you care about it. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, this is a good one. What are the most effective ways to increase your EBITDA?
There's a lot, right? There's a lot. So just looking at my clients, my clients that have the highest EBITDA margin as a percentage of revenue, they're the ones that have just figured out how to treat as many needs of the patient as possible. And so these aren't your switchboard operators referring out to specialists for anything and only doing, the basic drill and fill. These are the folks that have done the CEs, that have done, the advanced trainings to figure out how to do implants, how to do, as much of on the specialty spectrum as possible to keep that in-house and really treat the patient more holistically. Those are the folks that have the highest EBITDA margins.
Okay,
And so
awesome.
I'd say, you know, for just as general advice, especially for, younger docs, a lot of folks get so fixated on this private equity mindset. And, I teach the class on private equity, Finance 425. I love it, probably more than anybody. But, I'd say maybe focus on that a little bit less and focus just on improving your craft. Just get as good at being a dentist as you possibly can, and good things will happen.
That's awesome advice. I was just reading a book that shared the same advice. Like even when you think like you want to move on to something else, just execute your current role the best that you can, become the best at it, right? Like I think that's what we all strive for. So,
100%.
um, what is the biggest hurdle you face when working with clients?
Ah, oh man. Biggest hurdle I face when working with clients, I'd say it's near-term performance when we're going to market. I'd say a lot of folks, it's such and all-encompassing process that it's easy to get distracted, and it's very common for performance to slip as we go to market. And then, of course, all the investors and buyers are looking at near-term results, myopically thinking this is the new normal. And so I'd say, before you go to market and as you go to market, it's just so important to just work a little bit harder on keeping really, really good performance. And so I tend to not tell people to change a whole lot before they go to market, or to prepare, or try to, put lipstick on the pig, etc. But I would say just, if you feel like, hey, I'm going to go to market this year, it's probably not a year to, go take a few weeks off in the summer and do that special vacation that you've wanted to do. Even though I hate to say that, I want you to go, but maybe this year let's not do that. Or maybe that giant Christmas party cruise that we want to take the staff on, maybe not do that this year. Because each one of those dollars is going to get times by 8 unless we can do an add back, or 10. And so it's just kind of preparing to have your best year, and kind of having that mindset like, hey, this is going to be a tough year. I'm going to work really, really hard. And, this is kind of hunkering down and getting ready, because this is the most important financial event of your life. Let's make sure we do it right.
Yeah, working hard now for that reward in the future, right? So we all kind of need to focus on. So we have.
Oh, Jenny, I don't think I can hear you.
You cannot hear me. I was just
Oh,
only
there it comes.
trying to make sure you guys were awake.
Now you're back. Now you're back. You were gone for just a second.
I thought you were playing a trick on us, like just going like
What?
this.
Yeah, it sounds like my fault right now.
Like,
Just
you
everyone
stumped me. I'm totally stumped on this one.
Yeah. And Bob was like, yep, absolutely, yep.
Bob is so good. He would have answered. He'd be like, "Yep, got it. Let me answer." So,
by the way, Bob, have you noticed all the golf balls behind Jenny? Do you see?
I do.
Like, do you see
That's
how
a lot.
much she plays? Apparently, like that
I'm a
is.
pro golfer. Yes, that's me. Totally me. Not my husband at all. It's all me.
Got an amazing work-life balance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's just about equaling that, the time between work and golf. It's equally important. So, okay, so what advice, this time since you can hear me, what advice would you give to someone in the middle of a lengthy deal process? Kind of goes back to the question before a bit, I would assume.
Yeah, I feel like you don't know what you don't know. And so coming in as a doctor, this is a one-time event. You don't know how complex it's going to be. And I'm so sorry. And I try not to scare them too bad in the beginning, because if anyone knows how hard it's going to be, most people probably wouldn't go through with it. And then at the end of the day, they're pretty happy. It's kind of like running a marathon afterwards. You're like, you know what? Maybe 5 minutes afterwards, you're like, I'm never doing that again. But then, a week later, you're like, all right, that wasn't so bad. But a deal's the same way. It can drag on for so long. I've got a deal now. It's ortho group combined with an oral surgery group. Great deal. And we're under LOI with a private equity group. Great guys. But it's just, there's so much due diligence that's required to get institutional capital to write, a $50 million check these days, that it's exhausting. And you guys are running your business and, seeing patients, and then after hours going through these long, arduous due diligence meetings, and it is just exhausting. But just take it one day at a time. Just take it one day at a time. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. We'll get there. 100% we'll get there. But it's a lot. And so I think it is good to kind of go in with eyes wide open that, hey, this is a lot. And the more you can do up front to prepare. So after you go under LOI, it's horrible, right? They bring in all the third party due diligence providers trying to find issues. And it's just, it's a horrible time. But the more work we can do and the more we can negotiate up front in order to make that period as limited as possible and be as prepared as possible, so they're not finding out issues. We've already shown them all the issues beforehand. They don't have leverage, and it makes the process go so much faster and smoother. Doing that preparation up front pays huge dividends down the road. And oftentimes it's tough because folks just want to go to market today, which, I love that too. But if we can do a little bit more work up front, let's build out a really good due diligence data room. Let's get really clean financials. Let's be prepared to answer the questions that they're going to have. Then, the timeline isn't expanded for them to find even more issues, because they're going to find more issues. They're going to keep looking and searching. The more time we give them between their answering their due diligence requests, they're just going to come up with more. So the more work we can do up front to kind of clean house and get ready to go, that's going to help so much more on the back end.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I think the time spent up front identifying stuff that is not perfect, because no practice is perfect. There's there's issues with performance, there's issues with staff, there's issues with a whole bunch of stuff, and the more you're upfront about that kind of thing, in my experience, the better the process goes later. And like you said, Bob, if you've got an unlimited amount of time for due diligence, and sometimes it seems like it's unlimited, these people are, these third party, groups are hunters. I mean, their goal is to find whatever they can find. And of course, we're not suggesting that any seller hide anything. You want to be upfront and you want to disclose, everything. But as they say in real estate, right? Time kills deals, and that's definitely true in these things. The one piece of advice that I would add to what Bob said as far as sellers go is, and this sounds, this is not, something that you would hear from finance people, but take time for yourself, right? Exercise, right? Meditate, right? Go for a walk. Those dogs, haven't had love from you for a while. Take them for a long jog. Go hiking with them. Go do stuff that's physical in nature, and just kind of prepare your mind, because like Bob said, it's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint, and it's easy to get exhausted. And if you're a biker, go bike. If you're a jogger, go jog. Just do stuff constantly and consistently, and you're going to be better prepared for the long road. But the payout is there, once you go through it. So.
Yeah, great advice, guys. I appreciate that. This might seem a little off topic, but when you're selling an office, you're ready to go to market, you've done your due diligence, everything's prepared. What is the average life cycle, if you will, for selling a practice to a group? Like how long are they in the market for on average before they can sell? I'm sure
Good question.
And
yeah, obviously there's a lot of variables, and we're not always, in perfect control of all those variables, but general high level is a couple months to really get a deal ready to go to market, do the quality of earnings, put together the pitch deck, put together the buyer list, kind of get everyone's story straight, run through some investor presentation, preparatory meetings, etc. Then you go to market, and that is so fun. Going to market is so fun. The first couple weeks, all the investors, all the DSOs are super excited to get your new deal. They've been blowing up my phone to get the next new deal, and they're so happy to get it. They sign the NDA, they read the CIM, the confidential information memorandum. They're so excited. They ask a bunch of super easy softball questions. We just knock it out of the park. Love it. First 2 weeks, 3 weeks, so fun. Start setting up some of those investor meetings, primarily through Zoom. The same thing, they're kind of pitching themselves to you, and you're, answering their questions and kind of telling your story. It's super easy. It's a ton of fun. And then after that kind of honeymoon period wears off, then they're starting to ask tough questions. They're really digging in. They're finding the issues. They're finding the uneven results. No business is perfect. And these are, professional interrogators. They're going to figure out how to find, the issues. And so then it becomes a little bit less fun, where they're asking the tough questions. But the beauty is we've still got this cohort of 20, 30 folks that are still interested in the deal. We get 15, 20 term sheets. We know who to focus on. That's so beautiful to get, to have 20 term sheets. Now, all right, let's narrow it down to 10, the top 10 that we really like. Now let's turn the tables. Let's start asking them tough questions. Let's make them qualify themselves to us. Let's do reference checks. This is just as much them trying to vet you as just as much you trying to vet them, because you have options. So you need to pick the right group too. It's beautiful, turning the tables, making them answer questions, doing some due diligence on them. I love that. Having that competitive tension is magic in these processes, and that's what gets you the best value in terms. So that process usually lasts a couple months, sometimes 3 months, depending on, how detailed we get, etc. And then, after a few stage gates of different term sheets, we say, all right, now submit your best and final letter of intent with all the terms and all the detail and a blueprint for the purchase agreement, etc. And they submit, and maybe we get 7 of them. And from there, let's narrow it down, and maybe there's 2 or 3 that are the top, and we say, hey guys, we really like you, but you have to, sharpen your pencil a little bit more, differentiate yourself, put your best foot forward, all those other, ridiculous terms that we use in M&A. And then finally someone kind of differentiates themselves, and it's the right fit and it's the right offer, and the LOI is signed. And then we go under exclusivity. So that's when we lose a lot of the leverage, because we eliminate that competitive tension of having all those, 15, 20, 300 bidders, behind them. But the top bidder still knows if they falter, if they try to retrade, that we still have a bunch of folks waiting in the wings. So we go under exclusivity. They bring in their third parties to do their due diligence, confirmatory due diligence, and their investigators to find issues. And like I said earlier, that's a horrible process. It's so difficult. But having the right folks around you, like Ali, etc., helps a lot and helps streamline the process. And hopefully we've done a lot of work up front to be prepared for that. That process usually lasts 2 to 3 months, depending on how many issues they find, how long it takes us to answer their questions, etc. So call it 6 months from start to finish if everything's really, really fast and streamlined. Usually it's more like 9 months, call it, having a baby. Or sometimes it can be even as much as 12 months. So this is not a short process. This is a long, intensive process. Make sure you're working with people that you like.
Right. Make sure, like Ali said, you're getting that exercise in, because you're going to need that release.
You too. Really good call, Ali. Whatever you can do to keep stable and eliminate stress and not have too much deal fatigue. We see that all the time, where buyers fatigue the sellers so much that finally they're just like, sure, whatever, I'll accept that term. Let's just close already.
Or like, you know what, I'm just not ready for this yet.
Yeah, or just I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. No, that exhaustion is real. So, well, awesome.
Awesome, guys. Thank you both so much for being here today. I cannot wait to have people say, listen, I'm going to watch this again and again. There was so much great information. I know I'm going to get a lot of that and ask how they can get the recording after today. So thank you both for being here. I hope you both have a great day.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for being here. And everyone who's listening, don't forget our DSO Leadership Summit is in October this year in Austin. And so you're going to see a lot of great speakers like Bob and others, speak about these topics that really, you don't get to hear often. So hope you guys attend. And Bob, thanks again for making time to come, and go enjoy that beautiful Hawaii weather.
Come visit me, brother.
Bye, Jenny. Bye, everyone.